Hi, everyone. Congressman Joe Morelle from New York's 25th Congressional District, representing Rochester, Monroe County, and parts of Ontario County. I'm really, really excited today to have the President and Chief Executive Officer of Planned Parenthood of Central and Western New York, a longtime friend and somebody who's an incredible leader, not only in the in the space of reproductive rights, but healthcare, just broadly speaking. My longtime friend Michelle Casey. So, Michelle, welcome. Thanks for being here. Happy New Year.
Thank you, Congressman. It's so great to see you and Happy New Year. It seems fast and furious in 2026,
I,
though.
I often ask people, what point do you think the cutoff is where you should no longer wish people a Happy New Year? I'm sort of curious. What's your take on that? Do you have an opinion on it?
February 1st.
February 1st. I actually agree with you. Although I will say that it feels um, lately as though the first of the year was so long ago. I think it's the one thing about the Trump effect is and I think this is by design, chaos, recklessness, just, that's part of the way apparently he lives his life and is now forcing America to live their lives. But it's really, really, really troubling. But
Yeah, it's
we're here to
disorienting.
talk about, yeah, and it
It's,
really is.
yeah.
Uh, it's a little surreal, hard to process, even for people like me who spend a great deal of time in Washington and dealing with national, international issues, issues of life and death. It's a lot to take in. But we have an important not only topic to talk about. There's an important milestone coming up. We're observing this week the 1973 Roe versus Wade decision, which has now since been overturned by the United States Supreme Court in their, I put infinite wisdom. I don't know if it's infinite or wisdom or both, that
Yeah.
they've overturned and disrupted the reproductive rights of millions of women in the United States. So that's why I'm grateful for you, not only for being here and for being a part of the conversation, but all the incredible work you do. So do you want to just, sort of give us a sort of an update on where we are in New York, in our region,
Mhm.
but broadly across the country because it's now this awful patchwork that's going on that confronts women across the country.
Yeah, it's been very difficult I think the a lot of people see the overturning of Roe as like the major event, which it really was, right? But there's been rolling consequences ever since then, right? It's not like a 24-hour news cycle and then it's over. What it did was it established a national baseline for privacy, bodily autonomy, abortion access, all of that, right? And now there is no national baseline. There's abortion care is either banned or nearly banned in 19 states. And that means that depending on your zip code, really depends on if you can get access to sexual reproductive health care. We've had uh, there's been a number of other assaults, right, that have come after the Roe decision. Um, the Medicaid, defunding Planned Parenthood out of Medicaid is absolutely huge, and it sort of goes against the argument that you are trying to have fewer abortions. Because if you were trying to have fewer abortions, you would certainly fund the heck out of family planning care, sexual reproductive health care, make sure people had access to preventative care and birth control and all those things. And the impact of Roe being overturned and of like the Medicaid defund and some other things really is that people have less access to basic family planning care because health centers close, right? We've lost over 50 health centers since the Medicaid defund took place July 4th. So it's, really just a multiplier, right, of the awfulness that's happening. So,
Yeah, now you add that, and you're right. I mean, Medicaid is one of these interesting things because for years I was in the New York State Legislature, and in New York, of
mhm.
course, Medicaid funding. of abortions is something that we have jealously guarded, and it is allowed under federal law as part of your state, if your optional service, if your state chooses to do it. But New York, and I don't know where New York is in terms of the number of states that allow uh, reimbursement for abortion services for Medicaid recipients. I'm sure you probably know the number of states that do that.
I don't know off the top of my head how many states do that, but many states do. They see it as basic health care. But I mean, to be clear, though, federal funding has never paid, like through the Medicaid program, has never paid for abortion care,
Right.
right? Like
Right.
from the Hyde Amendment, that just goes back many, many, many years. And so, again, it's disingenuous to say
Right.
that, you're trying to reduce abortions by, um, defunding us out of Medicaid because Medicaid never paid except for state Medicaid, the point you made.
Right. Yeah, I should clarify that. In New York, you're allowed to do it in the Medicaid program, but the state itself pays for all those services. There's no federal match because of the Hyde Amendment, something which, many of us in Washington would like to eliminate the Hyde Amendment and allow Medicaid services to be paid for
Hmm.
across the country without regard to what state you live in. But
Right.
you raise a really important point, which is this notion that somehow you can restrict abortions by denying people the right to have the resources to be able to do family planning and to be able to make decisions that's best for themselves and their families actually leads to outcomes that are far worse. And so what you're really doing is that people and that women in states where abortions are now illegal, in some of the places where it's most draconian, it's not as though those people aren't having abortions. They're having them. They just have to travel to other states if they have the means to do it, and if they don't, they're doing it through means that are far less safe, far more dangerous, and lead to clearly unintended consequences. And do you know, are there statistics? It's got to be hard to even keep track of statistics like that. Do you have a sense for what's going on in those places?
Yeah, we don't have solid statistics because it's really hard. It's sort of underground, a lot of it, right? But
Mhm.
the a lot of people are traveling, so, and there is some information available about that. But the majority of people are not traveling. They're accessing abortion care through medication abortion and through providers within the United States and outside of the United States. And so. Um, there's a lot of care happening that way. I think one of the hidden pieces that pops up every once in a while is like if you're planning for an abortion, if you're 8 weeks pregnant, you want an abortion and you're in a state that doesn't allow that, you could conceivably travel if you have the time and the money to do that. You could order medications online. But if you are carrying a pregnancy that you actually want to bring to term and you're having problems with that pregnancy or your own health problems or problems with um, some other problem with the pregnancy, then those people are having significant trouble accessing care, right? And you see instances where people end up dying because, women end up dying because they're not getting the care they need, the emergent care they need. I just was
And
reading
that's,
about a woman. Oh, go ahead.
yeah. No, I just want you to explain that because
Hmm.
it's really important,
Yeah,
and people would not necessarily make like, why is that the case? Why? But it's because of the lack of services now, right? And probably fear by some providers
yeah,
that if it appears in a really difficult, complex case, if it appears to authorities as though the pregnancy ended and you were trying to terminate the pregnancy instead of trying to provide emergent care to save the pregnancy, you could still be you brought up on charges and
yes.
you're criminalized in some place. Is that the the consequence of
Yeah.
that is that
Yeah, that's
there
kind of the
is,
crux of it, right? Is that you have to, in some of these, there's not like a good definition about what life and health of the mother really means. And so essentially they want you to be on death's door, and what the who decides what that is, it varies, right? So it's not necessarily an actual clinical judgment. There was a woman I was reading about recently whose heartbeat was 192 beats a minute, like struggling with um, atrial fibrillation, and they would not, usually the thing that they would do for her is give her like a shock to put her heart back into rhythm, and they wouldn't do that because they thought it would hurt the fetus. Well, that's not science. It actually, they encourage, if the heart needs to be put back into rhythm, that you actually do that procedure, and that it would be relatively safe for the fetus. But the person did not get the care, and they ended up passing away, right?
oh,
Like, it's just, and there's story after story like that of people who are just being neglected, in my opinion, right? In not getting the proper care. And then, um, you know what I mean? It's
yeah,
scary. Like, I
yeah,
can't, like, if you're pregnant, should you be driving someplace with your family on vacation? And if you happen to be in a state and end up, in a car accident and have some kind of complication, right? Like, it's so
yeah,
frightening to think you got to think that way. But I'd be thinking that way if I was
right. And
pregnant.
providers must be thinking about it as well. What they're now, instead of simply the Hippocratic Oath, they now have to think about licensure, and they have to think about malpractice, and they have to think about criminal penalties.
Right.
So,
And civil penalties
understandably,
too.
and civil penalties is right, of
Yeah.
course. Um, all of those combine to make for a very, very dangerous environment for a lot of people. Are providers leaving some states where they have previously practiced?
Yeah. So, in a lot of the banned states, providers are leaving because they don't feel like they can either provide the full range of care, or that they can provide safe care. Like, imagine being an obstetrician in a banned state, and you have some of the tools have been taken away from you, that to be able to do a safe, evidence-based practice with your patient population. And honestly, I think the rural areas have been hurt most by this, right? Because of the clinic closures, the clinics that are hardest for any healthcare organization to operate are those in rural areas, because they're usually like lower volume. It's harder to recruit healthcare professionals to work in those areas.
Yeah.
And because there's a limited population that lives there. And so all of this really, more rural clinics have closed. If you rural hospitals have closed. If you need access to emergency obstetrics care, or just obstetrics care, there's, in some places you have to travel hundreds of miles for that, which is, I think, unthinkable in the United States.
Yeah, I agree. And to your earlier point, medicine, especially emergency medicine, is hardly an exact science. I mean, it takes judgment. That's
Mhm.
why, we value our healthcare providers. They have to make judgments, and when those judgments then are, in retrospect, someone's looking over your shoulder as though it were a textbook, and it's very dry, and they're holding you accountable for life and death judgments. That you make in the moment, and that can cost you your livelihood or your reputation. You're going to think long and hard about engaging, and it's sort of unthinkable. It really is that. And I said this before we started recording, but I think of my mom who lived until she was almost 89 years old. And when Roe was decided in 1973, from that point on until it was overturned, she had more reproductive rights in her life which is kind of astonishing, than my grandchildren will have, my granddaughters. And it's unfathomable to me that here we are still, dealing with this issue now, 50 some odd years uh, after Roe. I mean, it's sort of incomprehensible to me. I'm sure you feel the same way because you're dealing with it every single day. But isn't it hard to process sometimes?
Yeah, it is, and I think the same about my mom, and my son, right? He's 20 years old, and and now trying to navigate in this world, right? And the also, if you think about it, though, Joe, I feel like this is a way of trying to keep people down, right? Because I mean, one thing that access to birth control did and access to abortion care and is really to lead to bodily autonomy and the ability to choose when to decide if and when to have a family and how big of a family to have. And that really contributed to women being able to be in the workforce more fully, to be able to support themselves if they decided they wanted to be independent and not be in a, partnership with somebody. Um, and around the same time as Roe is when women were first able to get a credit card by themselves without, you know what I mean? Like this is not ancient history, right? Maybe
No,
some people
no,
would think so.
no,
Maybe if you're 10
no,
years old, you think it's ancient history, but I don't. And
no.
it's just, you know what I mean? I feel like that this is an effort to sort of go back. They want to go back, right? To
Well, yeah.
so
I don't think there's
women
any
don't have a
question that.
say.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think there's no, and a whole host of issues. And it's sort of
Mhm.
interesting and ironic, I think, that people who purport to have place such an emphasis on freedoms, whether it's freedom of speech or freedom of, the privacy rights, property rights, etc., that they purport to do it. But what are they doing? They're encouraging more of a police state every day, and that's around reproductive rights. It's around immigration. It's around all of these issues that suddenly now, as long as the people who you like are in control, you're okay with the government telling you, literally dictating almost everything you do, including limiting your ability to assemble, to seek a redress of your grievances, um, freedom of the press. I mean, all these freedoms are now under attack by the people who supposedly care more about freedom than everyone else. It's the ultimate irony. It's the Orwellian nature of what we're living in this moment.
Yeah, I think it's really scary, at multiple levels. And if you think about it, like, why is the government in healthcare, right? Like, the government shouldn't be. And like, there is no other area of healthcare that the government wants to get in and micromanage and subvert the doctor-patient relationship and say, you can't have this, or you can have that, or you can only have it in these circumstances. You know what I mean? There is just nothing in healthcare that's like that. And it's about power and control. It's about nothing else.
Well, it's starting to spread. I do think you're right, except now on vaccinations and the science around
Hmm.
vaccination. Now the secretary's apparently making his own diet be the national diet. It's a very strange situation, and people aren't being given access to information. People have a government that's actually promoting some really strange ideas,
That are less
and it
safe. I
really.
mean, if you
Oh,
look at the professional people who make judgments about these things based on science, this is not that. The American Academy of Pediatrics has completely rejected the vaccination schedule, and rightly so. It makes us less safe.
yeah. So it's become really almost. Um, the days, which is really hard to imagine, but the mid to late 19th century where you had snake oil salesmen,
Hmm.
promising that this oil or that thing would solve all of your problems from pneumonia to cancer, this one thing. And so you'd sell bottles out of the back of your traveling sales car or cart. And it feels a little bit like that's what we're
Yeah.
back to. It's really extraordinary. And this is a little off the topic, but just that whole notion that that critics of science and critics of medicine will say, well, made this recommendation, turned out to be wrong, as though somehow the scientific method isn't to continue to understand and have a better understanding of biology and anatomy and all of these things. Science isn't an
Hmm.
absolute certainty, but it is a body of knowledge that grows and grows over time, and it's just so frustrating. I do want to get away a little bit from sort of the biology and talk a little bit about the politics, if you will, even small p politics. So what's happening? Reproductive rights, um, once the overturning of Roe happened, was a big deal, which is now, what, 3 years ago? The decision came down to overturn it. Um, and it seemed like it was high on everyone's agenda. Everyone was talking about it. Women were understandably angry. Has that subsided? What's your sense of just sort of how people are feeling about it, particularly in those states that have become incredibly oppressive to women's reproductive rights?
I don't think that it's subsided. I think that there's a lot of other things that are coming at people, right? But I still think there's a focus on individual states trying to overturn these types of bans or laws. There are workarounds that have happened, but they are not. Um, it basically puts people with the larger burdens in society and barriers in society puts more burdens on them, right? Because like if I'm affluent and I have means and I want to have access to reproductive health care of any variety, I'm going to get it, right? I'm going to go someplace to get it if I can't get it close by. But that's not true for people with fewer financial means, and that type of thing. And so I think it's really places an undue burden on the folks among us who have the least, right? Which
Yes.
is
Which always seems like the
criminal.
case.
Yeah.
Right. Well, absolutely. And something that's so fundamental and so important to women and to their families, to be able to put them in a position where your rights are almost exclusively now determined by how much money you have, right? I mean,
Mhm.
that's which frankly is 180 degrees away from what rights are supposed to be. Rights are God-given, they're inalienable, and they're supposed to stand on their own without regard to some kind of litmus test based on how much money you have or how much wealth you have. So, well, I'm glad to hear you say that, because this is needs to continue to be top of mind for policymakers, top of mind for people who are running for office, to continue to talk about the need to get to a national standard that is consistent with Roe and what we enjoyed in this country for 50 years. So we need to get back there. And
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for all of your incredible work. I'm sorry that you and the great people who work with you have to go through this, but we're going to continue the fight. And just so much appreciate your partnership, your leadership, and your friendship. So thanks for being with us this morning.
Thank you, Congressman. I really appreciate all that you do to represent the folks in our area and to try to make the world a better place.
And I look forward to seeing you back in Rochester.
Yeah, absolutely.